June 21st, 1942. Tobruk, Libya, 0640 hours. The sun is already merciless. It hammers down on the shattered harbor of Tobruk, turning twisted steel into branding irons and the air itself into something you can almost chew. Smoke still curls from the wreckage of British gun pits. The echo of the last artillery shells fades into the desert like a dying animal. German half-tracks grind to a halt in clouds of chalk-white dust. Men jump down, boots sinking into sand darkened by oil and blood. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel steps forward slowly. You can hear the flies before you see them. Rommel removes his goggles. His eyes, sharp, calculating, exhausted, scan the port that has tormented the Axis for 8 brutal months. Tobruk, the fortress that defied Italian armies, swallowed German fuel, and mocked every timetable Berlin ever issued. And now, it has fallen. A staff officer rushes up, breathless, grinning like a schoolboy. Herr Feldmarschall, the fuel depot, it's intact. Rommel doesn't smile. He walks past burning trucks, past British prisoners sitting dazed in the shade of wrecked ships, past crates stamped with fresh stenciling, petrol, U.S. Army. His gloved hand runs across a steel barrel. It's cool, full, untouched. For a brief, dangerous moment, it feels like victory. Tobruk yields over 2,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, and rations, enough, on paper, to push the Afrika Korps all the way to Egypt, enough to silence the doubters in Rome, enough to justify the gamble Rommel took when he disobeyed orders and drove east without waiting for supplies. But paper victories die quickly in the desert. Rommel climbs a small rise overlooking the coastal road. His adjutant joins him, shielding his eyes. What they see next changes everything. To the east, far beyond Tobruk, the horizon moves. At first, it looks like heat mirage. Then the mirage grows shapes, lines, columns, dozens of them, hundreds. A river of steel and dust flowing westward along the coastal road. Trucks, new trucks, clean trucks, American trucks. They don't stop. They don't hesitate. They stretch so far that the end disappears into the shimmer of the Mediterranean sky. You can almost hear the engines, steady, confident, endless. Rommel says nothing. He knows logistics. He lives and breathes it. His victories in France were built on movement, speed, surprise. But this is something else entirely. This is industrial war. Behind him, German tanks idle on fumes. Mechanics siphon petrol from wrecked British vehicles using rubber hoses and desperate ingenuity. Panzer commanders argue over who gets priority. Every liter is counted, every drop fought over. In front of him, the British 8th Army, under a new commander named Bernard Montgomery, is being fed by an ocean-spanning artery Rommel cannot touch. America has not yet landed troops in North Africa, but its factories already have. Rommel turns back towards Tobruk's port. He asks a quiet, devastating question. How long until the next convoy reaches Alexandria? The answer comes back fast. They're already unloading, Herr Feldmarschall. That night, Rommel writes to Berlin. The lamp in his headquarters flickers as generators cough in the background. His handwriting is tight, urgent, stripped of flourish. No bravado, no Desert Fox myth, just arithmetic. Fuel in hand, limited. Fuel required for advance, enormous. Enemy supply lines uninterrupted. Axis shipping losses in the Mediterranean, catastrophic. He underlines one sentence twice. Without secure supply, further advance risks total destruction of the Panzer Army. The message goes out by radio and vanishes into the static. Rommel knows the truth now, even if Berlin does not. Tobruk was not the prize, it was the warning. The desert has given him a glimpse of the future, and it is paved with American steel. As the engines of Allied convoys grow louder in the night, Rommel stares east toward June 22, 1942. Axis Forward Headquarters, near El Adem, 0215 hours. The desert at night is supposed to be cool, But inside Rommel's command tent, the heat clings like a second skin. Maps are spread across a folding table, their edges curled by sand and sweat. A single bulb sways gently overhead, casting long, nervous shadows over the faces of his staff. Fuel figures are read aloud. They sound like death sentences. Panzer Regiment reports come in one by one. Half tanks operational, engines running at reduced revolutions to save petrol, recovery vehicles immobilized, supply columns stalled not by enemy action, but by emptiness. The Africa Corps, the most feared mobile force in the desert, is being strangled by distance. Rommel rubs his temples. Every kilometer east is another gamble. Every gamble burns fuel he cannot replace. You can almost feel the arithmetic tightening around him. Across the table, Major Westphal traces a finger along the map from Tobruk to Mersa Matruh, then onward to El Alamein. The distance is deceptively short, on paper. But in the desert, distance is not measured in miles. It's measured in liters. If the British retreat continues, Westphal says carefully, we may reach the Egyptian border before they can reorganize. Rommel looks up sharply. May, he repeats. He stands and steps outside. The stars above North Africa are brutal in their clarity. No clouds, no mercy. Somewhere beyond the dark, British aircraft prowl, well-fueled, well-rested, flying from airfields stocked with spare parts and fresh crews. Rommel listens for engines. Nothing. That, too, is ominous. The next morning, reconnaissance confirms his fear. The British are not collapsing. They are withdrawing deliberately. Montgomery, newly installed, cautious, methodical, is trading space for time. Time to stockpile fuel, time to repair tanks, time to let the supply pipeline from Alexandria swell until it becomes unstoppable. Rommel watches captured British trucks roll past his headquarters. They are stamped with fresh manufacturing dates, tires unworn, engines smooth. Some still smell of paint. American Lend-Lease. The United States is feeding the desert war like a furnace. Rommel gathers his senior officers. This campaign will not be decided by bravery, he tells them, nor by tactics. It will be decided by who can keep their engines running. He doesn't need to say which side that is. That afternoon, another message is sent to Berlin, this one more urgent, almost pleading. Rommel requests immediate priority for fuel shipments. He warns that continued offensive operations without logistical parity will lead to catastrophe. Hours later, the reply arrives. It is short, political, detached. Hold the line, advance when possible. Victory requires resolve. Rommel reads it twice. Then he folds the paper carefully and places it in his pocket. He has seen this before. Orders written far from the front by men who smell ink instead of petrol, men who still believe that willpower can replace tonnage, that ideology can power engines, that bravery can replace logistics. That night, Rommel walks alone among his tanks. Crewmen sleep beneath hulls to escape the heat. Mechanics tinker endlessly, coaxing life from engines that have already given everything. A Panzer III sits silent, its crew sprawled beside it, canteens empty. Rommel stops. He places his hand on the steel. Cold. Empty. The next day, British air attacks begin again. Light harassment, precise, confident. They know something the Germans do not. They can afford to wait. Rommel cannot. He orders a continued push east, not because he believes in victory, but because stopping might be worse. Retreat without fuel would be annihilation. Forward movement, however risky, at least keeps the enemy guessing. But even as his columns move, Rommel understands the cruel irony. Every mile forward makes the supply problem worse. Every success tightens the noose. On the coastal road, dust rises once more. German vehicles advance in thin, fragile lines. Behind them, the Mediterranean glitters, an impassable barrier controlled by Allied air and naval power. Ahead of them, Egypt waits, and beyond it, nothing Rommel can realistically hold. He writes one final note in his journal that evening. The enemy's strength lies not in numbers, but in the certainty of resupply. Against this, courage alone is insufficient. As the Afrika Korps rolls deeper into Egypt, Rommel knows the truth Berlin refuses to hear. The desert is no longer a battlefield. It is a balance sheet, and the Axis is already bankrupt. But the worst realization is yet to come, because the British are not done preparing. They are building something at El Alamein, something Rommel cannot go around. July 1st, 1942. El Alamein, Egypt. 0430 hours. Dawn breaks over a place that should not exist. To the north, the Mediterranean glows pale silver. To the south, the Qattara Depression yawns open, an impassable sea of salt marsh and soft sand that swallows vehicles whole. Between them lies a narrow corridor of hard ground barely 40 miles wide. Rommel stands at the edge of it, binoculars raised. This is El Alamein. There is no flank to turn here, no open desert to exploit, no room for the desert fox to run. For the first time in the North African campaign, the desert has walls. British artillery opens fire. Not sporadic, not probing, sustained. Shells march across the sand in disciplined patterns, bursting with clinical precision. Dust columns rise in perfect intervals. This is not the panicked gunnery of retreat. This is preparation. Rommel lowers his binoculars. He can feel it in his gut, the way a seasoned commander knows when the rhythm of war has changed. Montgomery has chosen his ground, and he has chosen it well. German tanks advance cautiously. Engines are throttled back to conserve fuel. Some crews are ordered to shut down entirely until the last possible moment. Every maneuver is constrained by a silent question. Can we afford this? British units do not ask that question. Fresh Matildas and Grants roll forward, engines humming smoothly. Ammunition trucks follow close behind. Field kitchens smoke in the rear. Radio chatter is calm, almost casual. You can almost taste a difference in morale. Rommel orders a probing attack. It stalls within hours. Minefields, dense, layered, carefully mapped, tear open the advance. Engineers work under fire, sweating, exhausted, desperately slow. British artillery finds them anyway. Every shell that lands costs the Axis something they cannot replace. Rommel moves constantly, appearing at forward positions, encouraging men, recalculating plans on the fly. But beneath the motion is a growing stillness. This is not a battle he can win quickly, and time is the one resource he does not have. Reports arrive that night like hammer blows. Fuel reserves critical, air support minimal, Italian divisions lagging, immobilized, British reinforcements continuing to arrive. Rommel sits in silence as the situation map fills with red pins. For the first time, he allows himself to think the unthinkable. What if this cannot be broken? He sends another message to Berlin, this one stripped of diplomacy. He warns that the British supply system is overwhelming, that the Axis cannot match it, that without immediate and massive logistical reinforcement, the front will collapse. The reply, when it comes, is worse than silence. Praise, encouragement, assurances of final victory. No fuel, no ships, no reality. Rommel crumples the paper in his hand. The next days blur together in heat and fire. Attacks, counterattacks, limited gains paid for with irreplaceable losses. German tanks are knocked out not by superior tactics, but by exhaustion, crews pushing machines beyond endurance. Meanwhile, Montgomery does not rush. He waits. He builds. Behind the British lines, supply dumps grow into cities of canvas and steel. Fuel is stacked in pyramids, ammunition in endless rows. Replacement tanks arrive faster than they can be crewed. Rommel's intelligence officers report the numbers. They are staggering. For every tank Rommel loses, Montgomery can replace 2. For every leader Rommel burns, Montgomery barely notices. One afternoon, Rommel stands on a ridge watching British trucks roll forward in broad daylight, unafraid of air attack. The Luftwaffe is absent, grounded by lack of fuel and spare parts. Rommel lowers his binoculars slowly. This is the moment, the exact instant when he understands that El Alamein is not a battle, it is a dam. And behind it, Allied power is rising like a flood. Rommel turns to his chief of staff. "We have reached the limit of what a commander can do. The rest belongs to industry," he says quietly. That night, Rommel drafts a final assessment, not as a gambler, not as the desert fox, but as a soldier acknowledging physics. He warns that the front cannot hold indefinitely, that a breakthrough is impossible, that withdrawal, however politically unacceptable, is the only rational course. He knows how Berlin will react, and still he sends it. Because the desert has answered him now, with brutal clarity. The Axis advance has run out of road, and Montgomery is about to prove it. October 23, 1942. El Alamein Front, 2140 hours. The night explodes. More than 1,000 British guns open fire at once, their flashes ripping the darkness apart in synchronized fury. The ground convulses, the air becomes solid. Sound crushes the chest. You can feel each impact in your teeth. This is Operation Lightfoot. Rommel is not here to see it begin. He is in Germany, ill, exhausted, summoned home weeks earlier, another cruel irony of the Desert War. Command of Panzer Army Africa rests with General Georg Stumme, a capable officer, but not Rommel. Not the man who understands the desert's language the way a sailor understands the sea. Within hours, the front is tearing open. British infantry advance through minefields under the thunder of artillery, deliberately clearing paths for the tanks that follow. Engineers move with confidence born of rehearsal and surplus. When one unit slows, another replaces it. There is always another unit. The Axis cannot match this tempo. Fuel shortages paralyze counterattacks before they begin. Tanks are held back, not for tactical reasons, but because there is simply not enough petrol to bring them forward and still have enough to retreat. By dawn, German positions are battered, but not yet broken. Then Rommel returns. October 25th, he arrives by aircraft into a war that has already shifted beneath his feet. He takes in the reports in silence. Losses mounting, lines bending, British pressure relentless. He understands immediately. This is the blow he warned about. Rommel orders immediate counterattacks, not because he believes they will succeed, but because delay will be fatal. Panzers surge forward, engines roaring, burning the last reserves of fuel in desperate thrusts. They collide with walls of fire. British anti-tank guns, well-supplied, well-sighted, cut them down. Artillery pounds assembly areas with terrifying accuracy. The desert itself seems to reject the Axis advance. Each failed attack drains what little strength remains. Meanwhile, Allied supply lines do not falter. Trucks roll forward even as shells burst nearby. Damaged vehicles are towed, repaired, replaced. Ammunition is expended freely. Fuel flows like water. This is not courage versus courage. This is abundance versus scarcity. On October 29th, Rommel sends his most desperate message yet to Berlin. He warns that without immediate permission to withdraw, the army will be destroyed. The reply comes quickly. Hold, no retreat. Victory depends on endurance. Rommel stares at the radio operator as if the words themselves are obscene. He knows what endurance costs when you have nothing left to endure with. The British strike again, harder, deeper. Breakthroughs widen. Italian units collapse under the weight of fire they were never meant to absorb. Axis formations hold, but holding consumes fuel, ammunition, men. On November 2nd, Montgomery launches the final push, Operation Supercharge. The dam breaks. British armor floods through the gaps, exploiting with a confidence Rommel once wielded himself. Axis lines disintegrate into fragments, fighting fiercely but without cohesion. Rommel makes the decision Berlin refused to make. He orders a retreat. It is late. painfully late, but it is the only choice left. As German and Italian forces pull back westward, they do so under constant pressure, harried by air attacks, abandoning vehicles that run dry. The desert road becomes a graveyard of burned-out trucks and silent tanks, monuments to a war lost not by lack of bravery, but by lack of supply. Rommel rides with the retreating columns, his face strong, eyes hollow. He was right. He had been right since Tobruk. That night, as he looks back east toward El Alamein, now firmly in Allied hands, Rommel understands the full weight of what has happened. The North African campaign is over in all but name. The Allied supply lines have not just supported victory. November 11th, 1942, near the Libyan coast road, 18-20 hours. The retreat stretches endlessly west. Vehicles move in ragged intervals, headlights blacked out, engines coughing. Men march beside trucks that no longer have the fuel to carry them. Others ride on fenders, clinging to whatever metal remains unburned. The road is littered with the skeletons of what the Afrika Korps once was. Panzers abandoned with turrets blown open, artillery pieces spiked and left behind, supply wagons reduced to ash. Rommel rides silently. There is no illusion left now, no gamble to be made, only survival. Every few miles, the retreat pauses as Allied aircraft sweep in low. Bombs tear into the columns, strafing fire scatters men into the sand. When the planes leave, the march resumes, slower, thinner, more hollow than before. This is what defeat looks like in a mechanized war. Not a dramatic collapse, not a single moment of surrender, just running out of everything at once. Rommel receives confirmation of what he already knows. American and British forces have landed in Morocco and Algeria. Operation Torch. A second Allied hammer falling behind him. The news tightens from both directions. North Africa is now a trap. Rommel gathers his remaining commanders near a roadside fire that night. Their uniforms are faded, faces gaunt, voices low. He speaks plainly. "We will withdraw as long as there's fuel to move. When there is no fuel, we will destroy what remains." No one argues. They have all seen the supply columns. They know who can afford this war and who cannot. November 11th, 1942, near the Libyan coast road, 18-20 hours. The retreat stretches endlessly west. Vehicles move in ragged intervals, headlights blacked out, engines coughing. Men march beside trucks that no longer have the fuel to carry them. Others ride on fenders, clinging to whatever metal remains unburned. The road is littered with the skeletons of what the Afrika Korps once was. Panzers abandoned with turrets blown open, artillery pieces spiked and left behind, supply wagons reduced to ash. Rommel rides silently. There is no illusion left now, no gamble to be made, only survival. Every few miles, the retreat pauses as Allied aircraft sweep in low. Bombs tear into the columns, strafing fire scatters men into the sand. When the planes leave, the march resumes, slower, thinner, more hollow than before. This is what defeat looks like in a mechanized war. Not a dramatic collapse, not a single moment of surrender, just running out of everything at once. Rommel receives confirmation of what he already knows. American and British forces have landed in Morocco and Algeria. Operation Torch. A second Allied hammer falling behind him. The news tightens from both directions. North Africa is now a trap. Rommel gathers his remaining commanders near a roadside fire that night. Their uniforms are faded, faces gaunt, voices low. He speaks plainly. "We will withdraw as long as there's fuel to move. When there is no fuel, we will destroy what remains." No one argues. They have all seen the supply columns. They know who can afford this war and who cannot. As the retreat continues, Rommel reflects on the arc of the campaign, the early victories, the speed, the audacity that earned him his legend. But legends cannot refuel tanks. They cannot replace engines worn down by sand and overuse. Industry can, and industry, Rommel now understands fully, belongs to the Allies. In Tunisia, months later, the remnants of the Axis forces will make their final stand. They will fight well, they will fight hard, but they will fight without hope. The outcome has already been decided, not on the battlefield, but in factories thousands of miles away. Rommel will be recalled before the end. Others will surrender in May 1943. Over 250,000 Axis troops will march into captivity. An entire army lost, not because it lacked skill or courage, but because it outran its lifeline. Years later, historians will debate Rommel's decisions, his risks, his disobedience, his brilliance, but even his critics will concede one truth. He saw it coming. At Tobruk, on the coastal road, in the endless line of Allied trucks vanishing into the horizon. Rommel understood before most commanders did that modern war is won by supply before strategy. That battles are decided long before the first shot by who can move fuel, food, and ammunition farther, faster, and in greater quantity. The desert taught that lesson brutally, and the world learned it at El Alamein. The sand settles now, the engines are silent, but the meaning of this campaign echoes forward, into Normandy, into the Rhine, into the final collapse of the Third Reich. Because once the Allies proved their supply lines were invincible, the outcome of the war was no longer a question of if, only when. They have become the weapon, and there is no answer to them. But the story does not end in the desert, because the lesson learned here will shape the rest of the war and decide
decide its final outcome.